All right, this is the May 11th, 2022 regularly scheduled meeting for the Cohasset Affordable Housing Trust. We do have a quorum present, but we'll open the meeting with a roll call. So if I may, I'll start with Rob Henry.
Present.
David Pfeiffer.
Present.
Tom Mead.
Tom Mead is here.
And Cindy Matheson. Cindy, you're muted.
Sorry, Cindy Matheson present.
Okay. We are missing two members today who'd previously alerted me to their noted absences. But the quorum is present. First up on our order of business is an item proposed to us by abutters of 25 Heather Drive. And we'll hear that item first, taking out of order the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, which we will come back to. Okay. This is under the public comment section, by the way. Is there anybody to speak for that letter?
This is Chris Davis. I'm happy to speak to it. I think if this is the normal process, Chairman, to step in at this point.
The public comment period is exactly that. And I'm sorry, my understanding is that your comments are as an interested party, a group, right? So
that is correct. So I can walk you through
okay.
that, give you the background on where we're from and whatnot, if that would help.
Feel free, the floor is yours.
Okay, excellent. Well, I appreciate it. I'm sure, if anybody else wants to step in from the neighborhood or what we've kind of talked about as the aggrieved parties here, they can feel free to, but I'll start off just briefly and then speak to the letter itself. So my name's Chris Davis. I live at 19 Heather Drive. I'm a direct abutter to 25 Heather Drive. I think most of the folks probably in attendance looking at the names here are all neighbors of what I think is probably best deemed Cedar Acres, the neighborhood of Cedar Acres and Heather Drive. It's interesting what creates the neighborhood of Cedar Drive and Heather Drive and Cedar Acres is 25 Heather Drive. It's a piece of land that for the better part of 30 years has been used as pathway between the two neighborhoods for access to Wheelwright Park, Wheelwright Park. As well as allowing the neighborhoods to communicate and play and meet and enjoy one another's company over the years. I think the neighborhood is more than a little frustrated with the town of Cohasset and its handling of the Warren article on 25 Heather Drive. I won't speak necessarily to the other property. As a group, I'm not sure really what the right adjective is, but maybe for the time being, I'll just see cleverly excluded from the discussion on matters affecting, our community, our neighborhood. And the discussion, at town meeting, I think we all felt was inappropriately and prematurely cut off before the vote was taken. As everybody probably remembers, we ended up losing that vote by about 8 votes. I think there was more to discuss and more opportunities to kind of sway that in the favor. Obviously, I think I expressed my frustration with a few of the board members here at that meeting. I think we're hopeful, given everything that's passed by, that there's a solution to work out with the AHT for its handling of 25 Heather Drive. But I think it's important for this group, and we're making the same things aware to the select board, the town manager and the Conservation Commission, that we are prepared to head down what would likely be a much more combative and expensive pathway and probably noisy as well. These are the type of things that tend to get publicized and pressed in other areas. And as a group, we have a significant amount of wherewithal that we'll take down that path if we don't think we're getting the appropriate attention for what we think has, been a little bit of a sleight of hand in terms of how this has been handled. We prepared, but again, I think before we're heading down that path, we certainly want to try and find a constructive solution. We prepared a motion that I sent to the board last week. It's been signed by 30 or some odd neighbors. That group is growing You can follow Facebook and the Cohasset 143 and see the likes that are growing around the issue. It's going to continue to grow. The basic motion or objective here is essentially, we want to establish a simple set of guidelines around the AHT's stewardship at 25 Heather Drive. We'll dig into kind of what the timing is, and we'd love to hear from you all about what you think the timing is of that ultimately transferring. But our goals are really pretty simple. There's really three things we're looking for: to ensure that the property is managed according to what the AHT's publicly stated goal is of raising capital. Again, I think the intent from everything we've heard is that this property is going to be sold to raise capital for the AHT to use towards its efforts in public affordable housing. We want to make sure that second, if the property is sold, it's going to a developer, for residential B use is currently intended around the property. And then lastly, I think we want to make sure, it's probably two parts, that it's done timely and, at a price that's reflective of what the AHT goals are. I think we've heard a lot of numbers thrown around on this parcel, $700,000. I think it's assessed at just shy of $400,000. We can assure you from a value standpoint, any developer, it's significantly less than that. If you really want to get down to what its highest and best use is, we believe as a neighborhood that it's for conservation, as it has been for 30 years. Just a couple more points, and then I'll certainly happy to turn it over to other folks. I think our principal frustration with this board, and I can't express it enough, is that you have opened up what has been a very messy situation around a property with little thought to what the repercussions are for our neighborhood. And quite honestly, I think what's most frustrating as someone that's in front of boards and that speaks to issues like this quite frequently, around my primary business, I don't think that this was done with, any really thought as to whether selling this property is a viable endeavor. I think the town only exacerbated that problem by failing to kind of perform what I would say is even a minimum level of due diligence around the location. I think it probably went back, looked to see that there's some documentation that said it's a tax taking and we're in compliance with the disposition policies of the town, but didn't really go the extra step. There's a number of things that if they peeled back just a little bit further, or even just took the extra level of typical due diligence that anybody would do on a property like this, you would have noticed that there's significant issues around the wetlands dating back 30 plus years. And again, just folks haven't done their due diligence and looking at transferring this into the property. So I don't want to take too much more time here at the public comment. I would love to hear what the board, thoughts are in taking up this matter, when it's going to occur, if it's this meeting or potentially the next meeting. And I'd love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts if you, had any epiphanies that maybe there is a need to kind of work with folks like us when you're looking at trying to handle these type of scenarios. Certainly applaud the AHC's efforts for trying to think creatively about how to kind of address affordable housing. It's a complicated issue. It's something that's important, but we do have a lot of concerns here. And again, just to reiterate, we are expecting some address from the boards and from the town as to how they're going to handle this moving forward. I'll let others speak at this point.
If you would, Chris, I'll ask you to hold for just a second. Is it fair to say that for the entire group, your proposed remedies are contained within the letter?
I wouldn't want to speak for everybody. I think we've all talked pretty closely. I think folks certainly have expressed, I think support of what I've done here, but I certainly don't want to cut off the discussion of anybody else that's interested in, speaking to that matter or looking for other alternatives. But I would say generally with the signatures on there, they're certainly in support of the letter. They may have additional comments to add to it.
I'm asking for the very simple reason that, everybody that's on the call right now, let me explain. Rob Spofford, I recognize your willingness to speak. Let me explain where the trust stands at the moment so that everybody's expectations out of this particular conversation are clear. The trust does not currently own the property. The town meeting authorized the transfer, but there has been no transfer executed. So the deed currently resides with the town. And as a result of that, there's not a thing the Affordable Housing Trust can do to encumber the property or encumber a property it doesn't own. So from a matter of timing, please allow that in your considerations over any speed of action. All right, that's the first thing. The second is anything that we would take on with respect to a piece of property that we did come to own would involve our council, the Affordable Housing Trust Council, who unfortunately is on vacation, not present today. So those two things will prevent us from deliberating on the proposal that was put forward under, I want to say 15 different households, probably close to 30 different residents' signatures. All right. So just so that everybody understands their expectations out of today's conversation, we cleared a space and made time on the agenda to make sure that this got aired in a timely fashion and that we would be able to consider it. So not only do I recognize Rob Spofford's willingness or desire to speak, but recognize too that there'll be questions from the individual trustees today. So be prepared for that. And we do have a tight agenda. I'm not trying to truncate the conversation. I think it probably deserves a separate item on, on a next agenda on a regularly scheduled meeting. And as a result of that, should be allotted more time than we currently have for it. Okay. With that, Rob Spofford had raised his hand, so the chair recognizes Mr. Spofford.
Yes, I live at 14 Heather Drive. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a formerly active person. I see some friendly faces there. Rob Henry, nice to see you this morning. Former selectman, former board chairman of the school committee and things like that, a decade of experience. Just Steve, to answer your specific question I just want to address that specific question that you asked. We had a great meeting under Chris Davis' direction here in the community, and I think we're pretty much all together on this. What we put together on this board, what we've given to you, we can't answer that question. We're going to respond based off of the action that you take. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So I think that this is a great first start of what we've asked. We've asked our council. I want you to understand we have engaged council in this as well to make sure that we're doing this in the proper manner. Of how we're going to manage this. I echo Chris's. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at town meeting because if I had been, I would have asked to indefinitely postpone this motion and to be able to bring it to another meeting so that we could have had this time to do some due diligence. So in any event, I think that we're anxious to see and watch what the board is going to do, and then we'll address and we'll react to that with advice of counsel that we've engaged. Chris, do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes, thank you for clarifying, Rob.
Thanks.
Okay, at this point, Lauren, do we have anybody else at the moment that has asked to speak?
There's a couple with their hand raised under the name Augie.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear the last part.
I said there's a couple with their hand raised, their electronic hand under the name Augie.
Yeah, I apologize. I can't see that. So can you tell me who's up first?
Yes, could you address yourselves, please? Thank you.
Hi, Kevin Sargent, 31A Mill Lane, Cohasset.
Donna Holland, 31A Mill Lane, Cohasset.
Okay, and then Lauren, if you would promote in order of hand raise.
Steve, that's all that we have. Just
No. I mean, I'm sorry. Then who was the first? Let me ask you that.
they're together. They're two
I'm
faces
sorry.
on one screen.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you.
But
Okay. Hi, good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
I'm Donna Holland. I'm here with Kevin Sargent. We live at 31A Mill Lane. I have no idea if anybody else is on from Mill Lane. We are a much smaller neighborhood than the Heather Drive neighborhood, obviously, much less houses there. But we kind of echo the concerns of the last speaker We felt a little blindsided by it. There were rumors up and down what was going to go on. And of course, we attended the meeting. My fiance is an abutter to the property, and he indeed has a right of way that goes over it. And we've looked at the property over the years several times. It's assessed at over 200,000, so it was a prohibitive number, and we never actively looked any further. But there are people on the lane who are interested, and we're especially interested. And we are curious. There was the gentleman that spoke at the meeting, which I think was you, Mr. Gomer, and you had said that we had made the 2020 census in regards to 40B, but we most assuredly would not make the following census. And there was some confusion with our neighbors about that. I understand we have to have a certain percentage of affordable housing in the town. If not, then the 40B is allowed, etc. But just how much of a window do we have before? And is it 5 years down the pike? It depends upon the census. And properties that I understand the transfer hasn't been made at this point in time, but would this particular property on Mill Lane and the Heather Drive, considering it's owned by the town and presumably it's going to be owned by the trust, is it protected from the open market? It's not on the open market, in other words. So I know that's a lot of questions and concerns, but those are our thoughts.
To answer your question with respect to compliance, right, which is
Yes.
the way, are we in compliance with 40B? I'm sure Lauren will correct me if I'm wrong, but we are currently in compliance with 40B
Yes.
from the perspective of having units which are allowing us safe harbor. Fancy way of saying they're not occupiable units at the moment. They've simply been announced. They are in application with the state, excuse me, the state commission, DHCD, I'm sorry, department, for final approval. We don't expect that there's any problems with those, but nonetheless, on one development, which is what you see at the Stop and Shop Plaza, they're probably a year to a year and a half away from being occupiable. And that's just a guess. There's nothing official about that time estimate. But that's a guess because there's an awful lot of work to be done before they would get an occupancy permit. There's another that the first initiative that the Affordable Housing Trust has taken on is at 808 Jerusalem. And that is, at the moment, it's again within safe harbor, but there's no construction started. As a matter of fact, do they even have an appointment at this point with the planning board, Lauren?
808 Jerusalem Road is before the zoning board right now.
It is, okay. So that process has just started. And as a result of that, there's probably, it's my estimate, it's not please don't take it as an official count, but there's probably 20 to 24 units that are in that safe harbor. And without them, we are well below 10%, which is the compliance number. With the level of development of the remaining private lots in town or additional housing units that are likely coming, by the time we're at the 2030 census, we estimate that without adding somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 units per year, we won't be in compliance again. We'll be subject to 40B. And as I pointed out at the meeting, the entire reason for becoming very active as a town and a community on affordable housing is to recognize that, number one, we have no place to put our own people. So if you want your cops to live here, if you want your firemen to live here, if you want your plumber to live here, it's getting really hard. That's number one. And the second one is that, frankly, I don't know anybody that looks at the Avalon development and says, boy, that fits with the character of our community.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with the Avalon development. I mean, it served a great purpose. it scared the daylights out of a lot of people. But to me, the primary drawback of the Avalon development is that it's a traffic nightmare, and that does impact the entire community, right? So the goal was to take over our own destiny, if you will, and that's the basis for the affordable housing initiatives. And that's, our focus is on maintaining compliance, adding units where we can. There really isn't that much developable property in town. And we recognize, as a matter of fact, if you look at our agenda, one of the things you'll see on the agenda is discussion over a communication program, which frankly is overdue. And I think a large part of the items that are being brought before us today by Heather Drive residents and Mill Lane residents, represented by you and Morgan Carroll, who's up next. It really summarizes that concept that, frankly, we haven't done a tremendous job, although we've been very active in a lot of areas. We haven't done a tremendous job explaining those things that we're talking about now.
Right.
And just as importantly, communicating from the standpoint of the town or its agents, if you will, in a clear and consistent manner, what a land transfer means, who it impacts, how it affects. So, we recognize this. We also recognize that that there are some interesting proposals in front of us. And as I said, we're not being evasive, we're being blunt. We can't tell you that we're going to, we're going to entertain those directly today. I can tell you we will entertain it, we will react and respond to it, and it will do it in a timely fashion. I hope that answers your questions at the moment, and we'll keep the communication and the dialogue open. And if I may, unless you have a follow-on, I'm going to recognize Morgan Carroll.
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Morgan Carroll, are you still wishing to speak?
I am. Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on the point, and thank you for bringing that point to everyone's attention, that communication is really not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. I want to bring to everyone's attention how many new members and new faces you have here on the call today who you must not have seen in previous meetings. And that's because of our own local outreach and our own local communication efforts. The reason that you may see so many of us without our cameras on is because we're driving into work. We are stepping out of work meetings to attend your meeting because this is important to us. We're taxpayers and we're property owners, and it goes against our constitutional rights to be misrepresented when it comes to our property that we pay and have worked so hard for to own in Cohasset. So I just want to drive home that point that I do understand that there are reasons that you are not able to fully flesh out this conversation regarding Heather Drive and Mill Lane today. But if there's going to be further communications, it's absolutely necessary that the specific addresses are mentioned on meeting agendas and fully communicated to the people who have a invested interest, which really expands the entire town. It goes beyond a nice to have. It's a must have. It's our right as property owners and taxpayers in this town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. All right, turning to the board, who on the board has questions for the group? No, Cindy Matheson and Tom Mead.
Well, I'll say one thing. I think, to Steve's point, we don't own the land. We don't have the any authority over it, and we are, particularly the last 3 years since this group has been organized, we've been very diligent in trying to meet, not just have compliance, but get things under construction and we have many things to consider. And we are not really going to get serious about considering something that we don't have yet. when we have other things we have on our agenda. We meet once a month and we try to pack a lot into it. So, you know, I think it's great that you guys have gotten together and all that, and we will take everything seriously. But I think right now to have a whole lot of questions, it's a little premature.
Cindy Matheson, I saw you next.
I was just going to emphasize, obviously, the conversations taking place in terms of the importance of communication. And I would agree with Ms. Carroll, who said it's not, communication isn't just a nice to have, it's a need to have. And, you know, we're a small board that has kind of gotten started, and we're doing our best along the way. So picking up on that aspect, you all emphasize the clear need for it. And all I can say is we are going to do our very best to meet that challenge.
Okay. Tom Mead.
Thanks, Steve. I agree with, you know, with everything that's been said and appreciate the new faces. We have been having public meetings for a couple of years, and I don't think we've ever had anyone from the public attend any of those public meetings. With respect to identification of the property, I guess I would just kind of make the point, and like generally speaking, most of what's in that letter is probably better addressed to the select board. When it comes to the disposition of town assets, again, that hasn't happened yet, and we're really not trying to pass the buck here. You'll see if you, you know, look at the past meetings, we're very intentional about having town council here. We go into executive session where we discuss specific properties. You kind of have to think of the Affordable Housing Trust as, not kind of, it is a distinct and separate entity from the town. Think of us almost like a developer ourselves. And as we look at the town tax rolls for potential development deals, we don't want to put that out in the open for, you know, other, let's say, for-profit or other potential nonprofit developers, anybody else to sort of piggyback on what else we may be looking at. So again, totally hear and respect the need for you know, better disposition plan, communication plan, all that things, but that sits squarely with the town. From the standpoint of us taking a look at what we might do or what we may propose, you know, we have to keep that tight to the vest, you know, because we don't want to be raising flags for anybody else, and it's not neighbors. This is not a, you know, this is not in any way backhanded or back room or anything like that. I'm a developer. This is what I do for a living, and I understand that, you know, these things have to be done in a certain way. So anyway, so I attended town meeting. I appreciate the thoughtful and thorough letter that the Heather Drive folks have sent, and additional comments from Mill Lane. Again, I'll say specific to process, it seems like a lot of that needs to be addressed to the select board, because what you'll find from us, I'll give 808 Jerusalem Road as a very specific example. As soon as we came to be owners of that property, there was a letter that went out to abutters, and there was a public RFP process that went out in order to take the next steps with respect to potential development of that property. And I think we covered this at town meeting as well. To the extent anything happens with any of those pieces of property going forward, there would be notices and noticing and abutter notices and all those things. 808 Jerusalem Road in front of ZBA. You know, there's a town and, you know, state process to go through for notification to abutters as that goes through its development process. So let's try to just keep that clear ourselves amongst the trust. And as we continue these conversations with the abutters, let's try, if we can, to keep those two things separate. With respect to the potential disposition of the land, you know, let's leave that for the select board. For what we do once we own the property and the process going forward and the communication plan and all the different things that the Affordable Housing Trust will work hard to do. We too are taxpayers. We too are town, you know, we live here in town. I too am taking time away from my job to have these meetings. And we've spent a lot of time doing this, a lot of diligence doing this. And we do look forward to keeping this conversation open. I think that's about it.
Chair recognizes David Pfeiffer from the trust.
Morning, everybody. First of all, I am genuinely thrilled to see so many people here. I hope we keep having more guests. It's been nice to not just be looking at each other. We keep referencing 808 Jerusalem Road. Excuse me, this is the worst time to lose my voice. Go figure. I thought it might make sense just to actually explain what's happening at 808 and just so everyone's on the same page. That is a lot behind Corner Stop, essentially. And to Tom's point, land was transferred to us at town meeting. We sent out letters to abutters at that point. Started talking about what to go in there. A 2-unit duplex is going in, which I'm very excited about. I actually tried to bid on a house next to it, which went for a lot of money. And it's going to be, I think, a really cool development. Anyways, all that's to say, I think Tom hit most of the points I wanted to get to, which is our best practice is once it's actually within the AHT's property, anything's going to happen or even think about happening, that's when it's up to the AHT to reach out. I do hear y'all. I think the town as a whole, we need to do better communication. As others have said, I would remind you that we're also a volunteer board. I'm taking out time from work today too. We have all called in from the road, from traveling, stepped out of meetings to participate. So we're glad to have extra people here helping us out.
The chair recognizes two folks from, for lack of a better phrase, the abutter community, and I'll take them in the order that I saw the hands. And at that point, we're going to wrap discussion for today with the assurance that this will be a separate agenda item, including the possibility that it might be a special meeting of the trust. You'll be alerted if it's all right with this group. I would like to make sure that Lauren, that we alert, excuse me, the Mill Lane abutters as a group the next time this topic comes forward. And likewise, the same with the Heather Drive. Maybe we can just pick up the signatories on the letter and alert them accordingly. Okay. All right. So in order of the show of hands, and I saw I've got Chris Davis first, Millicent Broderick second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief, and I wanted to address Mr. Mead's points, and the other gentleman. I don't see him up on the screen anymore. So Mr. Pfeiffer. So listen, we appreciate it. I think to Ms. Carroll's comments regarding we're all here and everybody's response to it. We get it. You guys you have a thankless job in many ways. So and I'm speaking to the board. We do appreciate what you guys are doing. I think this is going to be, many of these items are going to be taken up with, I must be catching Mr. Pfeiffer's voice loss there, but we will be taking things up with the select board, town manager. They were both copied on the note. We'll be looking to probably having Conservation Commission join all of these conversations because they're, it's drastically important given the history of what's gone on here. We get it. We understand you don't own the property yet, so we will be directing that towards the Board of Selectmen to kind of see what elements are there. I too am in development, so I can appreciate the difficulty of addressing things like this. I think we're our principal concern is, again, just not having been noticed in the process, as Ms. Carroll talked about. That needs to change, but I think there are a number of things that we can do here, and we're not trying to stand in the way of what the AHT is achieving. It's about how it's achieving it and making sure that when you state your objectives that they're followed through on as it relates to the property. So again, I think we'll be working quite a bit with the select board. They're going to be very aware of it. That's where the majority of the issues really lie in terms of communication, due diligence, and that aspect, because they're ultimately driving the process of transferring this here. So I can assure you we will be addressing that there. We do want to be constructive with you guys, find ways to kind of do this effectively when it does get into your control. So we do appreciate you guys highlighting that. It's a very good point. It's really nothing you can do at this point, but we do, it will ultimately be in your control. And we just want to make sure that the process is well thought out as it's executed. So we appreciate what you guys are under control, what your objectives are here. So.
Okay, and thank you. Millicent Broderick.
Yes, hi, good morning. First of all, thank you all for your volunteer time. It seems to me that if the property, I'm not familiar with Mill Lane, but Heather Drive I am. And if the property had been inspected or even looked at, that we would not be here this morning talking about this, because there are 3 brooks running through it. There is a lot of rock outcrop. It would cost about $1 million to develop that place, to make it habitable. So if you had just come out and looked at it, you wouldn't have, I don't think this would have happened, because I think we're all flabbergasted that this wants to be developed in the first place. So basically, that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. And with that, I'm going to wrap this item for this meeting. As I noted earlier, you will be, each of you, by way of best communication we have, will be alerted for in 2 ways for the next meeting with this topic at hand. First of all, will be communication through the known abutters, and in the case of Heather Drive, we have names and addresses of signatories on that note. And secondly, as is always the practice, there will be a published public agenda 48 hours in advance is the minimum. Typically, we're up, I think, 3 days in advance or so. And it will be noticed with respect to the addresses. So just be assured that that's the case. And I have to echo, I can't remember which of the trust members' comments it was, but frankly, I didn't see this many people at a meeting since, well, actually, there was only one selectmen's meeting I ever saw this many people. And that was with respect to the police chief. So, I guess all politics is local, right? However, I can't leave on that note without pointing out that none of this is political, which to me means an agenda-driven item. As I noted at town meeting, for those of you who attended, you may have missed it, you may not have. There's a lot of things we want as a community. All right, we may want a new high school. We may want lights on a baseball field. We may want a new town hall. But there's one thing that we have to do under state law, and that's provide for affordable housing. We have no out on that. So either we get to choose how to do it as a community, or somebody else gets to choose where and when they want to do it. And there's a significant waiver of restriction when that happens. So we're trying to avoid that, and I hope we can come to an agreement here as a group that that's a worthwhile endeavor, not because we sit on the trust, and frankly, we're in 2-year terms and they're always looking for people. So please feel free to step forward at any time. I'm sure there's space to fill. I thank you for today's conversation. Be assured it will continue, and feel free to stick around if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Lauren, I believe the next item on the agenda is, and has Rob Jeffers joined us yet?
No, he's not able to join us today.
Okay. So next item on the agenda then is actually our discussion about the transfer of land as an update. We've already begun to address the first piece, which was communication with neighbors. But I actually wanted to talk about this in a little bit more depth as a trust, as it concerns our endeavors for the communication plan. So with that, Cindy, if I can turn to you, and based upon town meeting response, based upon the response here at today's meeting, where neighbors are expressing their views, how would you propose, or how would you see the proposed communication strategy that you put together addressing this from the trust point of view?
Well, it's still in its early stages. And my next hope is to meet with Justin Schreier. Am I saying his name right, Lauren, who's taken, yes?
Thank you. Justin Scher is also on our agenda and he's here with us today.
Oh, yes, excellent. So I'm hoping, I am far from being a communication specialist. We recognize there's a need, obviously, for a plan to go forward. So I'm volunteering my time and doing the best I can in that regard. I'm better at organizing, a plan than any kind of, useful, super effective communications network. It seems to me that from the things that I've learned from other effective affordable housing trusts in communities similar to ours, one of the key messages that comes across is transparency and open communication, and leading the organization on this communication plan. That's the key objective here, is to be open and transparent and keep town and interested parties as well informed as possible on what our activities are. It seems that one of the things that we should be looking at quickly is putting together a website so that the list of items that are in our pipeline or that are publicly available for discussion are anybody can look into the website and see where our status is, such as 808 Jerusalem and some other projects in planning that will be part of the people who've opened up properties and are offering to show some deed restriction in those properties, I guess. So I'm not speaking all as clearly as I like. So that those would be available for folks. And then how we interact with neighbors and how you can give your input in terms of what our goals and understanding are. We need the feedback mechanism to come back from there. So I'm just saying we're kind of in the early stages of hopefully putting together a reasonable communication plan. I'd love to speak with any of you who have some ideas that how that would be useful to you.
Rob, you had your hand up. You're on mute, Rob. Still on mute.
I should say, don't underestimate yourself. This is a good start. But I was one of the people, because of my long business background and stuff, that the only way to be a success, whether it's a trust, it's a company, it's a whatever, is to have a business plan, which we didn't have, and have goals and objectives. And that's how you really can keep track of what you're doing and follow through. Because I think the biggest thing, and people already mentioned this morning, is communications. That's kind of what the deal is today. As many technological things we have, we still don't communicate well enough. And when you have a business plan and goals and objectives like this, then it's an accountability. And one of our biggest things we've discussed is communications and the town knowing what we are doing. Because up until, even though this affordable housing trust has been in effect for, I guess, 20 years, it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that we've really been active in terms of doing this, because it is so necessary. As we keep saying, the 40B is there. We can't avoid it. And the fact is that we have now a group that's all interested in common goals and objectives, but we want to make sure, and we've said at many of our meetings, that we want to keep the town informed, even though these are public forums. How many people are going to tune into a monthly affordable housing trust meeting? So we are, every time we meet, we talk about communicating better what we've done, because we think we're making some good headway. The fact that we've got what we have in place now is a whole lot more than we did 3 years ago. So fear not that we're very cognizant of that and trying to communicate better. And we're not all the way there yet, but we're certainly on the right track.
Okay. Anything else from the trust at the moment? Because we are going to come back to this with bringing Justin into the conversation, I think, within the next few minutes.
Yeah, I want to hear from Justin, and then I think I have a lot of questions.
Okay, super. Moving on to the next item then on this piece of the agenda is ownership transfer steps. And Lauren, at this moment, we are at the very beginning, as I understand it, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we have our council dealing with town council to transfer the deed, if I understand the steps properly.
Right, that's my understanding as well.
Okay. Has Cindy Mara given us an idea of what that time frame would be?
I'm not able to advise on that at this time.
Got it. For the members of the trust, and just my own experience is that anything that goes before the town for execution, if it speeds the issue, you've got to really ride hard on it. And ideally, we would like this to transfer before the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. Okay, so that means that we're going to be riding hard on it to make sure that the transfer takes place before June 30. And it's really a very simple execution, but remember that none of this takes place without, even though it's been authorized by town meeting, the actual transfer, I believe, has to be executed by a properly constituted Board of Selectmen with a quorum by way of a vote. So it has to make an agenda, you get the idea, and then council ends up getting to work on it. So the point in all of this is that the transfer hasn't taken place and probably won't take place for another 30 to 45 days. That's my best guess, and that's all it is a guess. Any questions on that? All right. Next item is the evaluation of the existing parcels. This is something typically we would turn over to the steering committee to report back to us. And I was hoping that Rob Jeffers would be here because I'd like to see if we can get that evaluation. Because it leads directly to another item just below this, which is as the butters have pointed out, they don't believe the parcels are developable. I certainly, and no one on the trust, I would expect, would try to extend individual expertise on this, but rather depend upon that evaluation. And, in the event that it turns out that the parcels themselves are inappropriate or unsuitable for development, then it's not of interest for the trust to continue to hold an asset which doesn't further our objectives. So the question then becomes Plan B. What is Plan B? And I think we have to refer back to the objectives of the trust, which are to, frankly, to develop an asset level on the balance sheet, which allows us the amount of flexibility necessary to support projects. The idea of taking in land is either that it's worth money or it provides a development opportunity. So if you have immediate thoughts on this, I'd like to hear them. If you don't have immediate thoughts on this, then I'd like you to ponder it. So from the board, from the trust, does anyone want to speak to this item? Tommy.
I mean, it kind of hits the bottom 3 points on your on this agenda item: evaluation, initiation steps, and Plan B. We did do, obviously, between the planning department, affordable housing steering committee, and us, we did sort of, let's call it desktop due diligence, enough to make Heather Drive and 39 Mill Lane of the properties that we looked at, sort of check enough boxes to try to move them forward. And so, I agree. The next level is to some degree, a more in-depth evaluation. But, and again, I wish Cindy Amaro was here. He could give us a little more direction on it, but I don't think we're going to, as a trust, employ a civil engineer or wetland specialist or anything like that to do any type of due diligence. And so I just want to be clear about that. Like, we're not looking to develop, especially Heather Lane. So in my view, the next step specific to Heather Drive rather is an RFP process to hire an agent, right? Because this is the whole point would be to put this out, for sale on the market and let private developers decide whether or not, I don't know, what is the fair price for this based on the site work that might be needed. And that's assuming they clear whatever they see as potential, Concom or other hurdles. So, that to me, like, if we want to talk next steps on Heather Drive specifically, it's like, okay, who we hiring for a realtor? Seems to me like the next step, because I think we want to stay away from that deeper due diligence and leave that to potential developers.
Lauren, I think Cindy answered this question for us in the past, but we're not bound by 30B procurement on this, are we?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right.
I thought we had to put, reaching back to 808, I thought we did need some type of RFP process or whatever to hire the realtor. I could be totally wrong on that.
With the absence of counsel, I would suggest that we can circle back with her when she
Yeah,
returns. from
Totally agree.
vacation.
Yep. I started there and I should have stayed there.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments on this agenda item?
Can I ask a question, a member or not a member?
I'm sorry, Mr. Spofford, I didn't hear your question. It broke up.
May I ask a question as I am not a member or not?
Well, the chair will recognize Mr. Spofford's question.
Just real quickly, Steve, thank you very much. Just a point of process, because what I heard earlier in the meeting was that the property had not been transferred to you. And therefore that we should go to the Board of Selectmen. But as I'm hearing this, it sounds like you're actually taking steps on the property that has not been transferred. So I just want to understand the process. That's my question.
Okay.
I'm confused on what the process is based off of what you said earlier.
No, I did. I'll defer to Mr. Mead with respect to the comments over taking it to the Board of Selectmen. What we're attempting to do, Rob, with respect to these parcels, is to prepare ourselves for the objectives of the trust once the transfers are made. All right. As you and I say this, it's not some sort of inside comment, but Rob he's demurring about his experience. Rob has extensive experience and the scars to show for it, working within the community in both elected and appointed positions. And as you can attest, Mr. Spofford, nothing moves quickly, nor does it ever move quickly enough. And as a matter of fact, price increases generally outpace the conversation. So our attempt here as a trust, and one of the reasons the trust is in existence, is that it can move much more quickly than a public or an elected public body. All right. And so what we're trying to do is prepare a path that helps us to understand what our next steps can be so that we can undertake them with some haste, so that this parcel doesn't sit in the trust for 2.5 years doing nothing. Okay. That's the basis for it. And Tom Mead will respond to your.
Yeah, just to clarify, because I think the question was in response to, some comments I made. And again, I should have just stayed where I was, which is Cindy Amara is not here, so we can't even ask the question. It's an internal discussion amongst ourselves, or maybe a clarification for my own self. There's this stuff here about evaluation of parcels, initiation, Plan B. I'm suggesting to the trust members here that there's not a whole lot of additional due diligence that we as a trust are going to do. We are going to, hypothetically hire an attorney, hire a realtor to put this property up for sale. Now that comment right there, right, is post a transfer of that land to us and post the neighborhoods, further discussion with the select board, or, I don't know, whatever else happens. We only meet once a month. We cannot, discuss things outside of the public meeting forum. So Rob Henry and I are of the same mind on this one. Like, it's really difficult to act in that manner and to get things and keep things moving. So I try to preview stuff, think about what our next steps are, have us be ready. Let's say the next time the AHT is in session in a public meeting. Okay, let's think about that fact and say to ourselves, okay, possible by that time the transfer is done and we're talking about hiring a realtor. And as a trust, to start to wrap our heads around, what the particular steps will be on a particular project.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Thanks, Steve.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. At this point, our next, I'm sorry, does anybody else in the trust have comments on these items? Fair enough. We'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion with Justin Schreier, who has joined the community or joined the town as a communications and community engagement specialist, which to my knowledge is the first time we've ever had such a role. Justin, welcome aboard. You have such a fresh and enthusiastic face. It'll take us a little while, but I'm sure we can change that.
You see my gray beard?
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just wanted to thank the board for having me this morning. Thank Lauren for having me as well. Cindy, I'm going to get with you after this meeting, and we're going to set up a time to hopefully meet this week or very early next week. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to work here for the town. I'll just tell you a quick thing, a couple of notes about my background. I am a ex or former television news reporter, worked in several different areas, several different markets, started my career up in northern Maine in the Bangor, Maine area, where I worked for 2 years. And then I worked in Tulsa, Oklahoma for about 3 years. And then I wrapped up my time in North Carolina for about 2 years. I worked for NBC affiliates and a CBS affiliate, covering everything from local politics, school board meetings, city council meetings, all the way up to breaking news and so forth. So I am very excited to be here. I hope to bring some of my communications skills to help the board really get their message out and hone your communications plan for the future. And I am excited to be here. What I'm really going to be working on for the town is obviously I'll be working with several boards. I'll be working with the select board as well and different committees. I'll also be doing things such as emergency communications for the town during, if we have intense weather situations come up, working with MEMA and working with SEMA as well, and also doing broad outreach to the town about different projects. So I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades. I wear many different hats, and I am excited to work with you all. And I'd like to open it up to some questions because, as I've heard from Mr. Pfeiffer, you all have several questions. So thank you for having me.
Sure. Justin, in just a moment, I'm going to actually, you'll be deluged with questions, but where I think the trust can use your help most directly is going to be in helping us to achieve our objectives with respect to communication. Part of that is, and Cindy laid out a number of these items in the draft plan. But one of them is to, express our mission with the community and develop engagement. Ideally, we develop engagement with respect to support as opposed to resistance. And that's that part of it is directly related to how we communicate with the community at large and how the trust engages that communication. Is it a two-way street, or is it, which is what we prefer, or is it just an outbound lane of noise going to the town? Not what we prefer. And so we're looking for tools. As you probably may not know, this town used to live and breathe by way of a local newspaper, and it used to scream and yell by way of another local newspaper. But the two of them served a purpose, and it kept dialogue going, for better or for worse in many cases, but it kept it going. Now the dialogue takes place on social media without a clear understanding as to whether or not facts have been reported, et cetera. The other item the newspaper would lay out very clearly and well in advance was what the town was doing and so forth. We recognize the tools have changed. But having said that, we also recognize that the need for clear, effective communication based on, relevant facts still exists. So we need your help. By the way,
Well,
congratulations. Those are some very interesting markets that you worked in. I have a nephew right now who's an anchor and reporter in Missoula, Montana. And he covered some miles, much like you did in Tulsa.
Absolutely. And I should actually mention that I'm also, I started out as what's called a multimedia journalist. So I am fairly skilled in everything from social media to video production to video editing, creating multimedia projects as well. So I'm excited to use my skills to help you all as best as I can.
Okay. Cindy Matheson.
Can I just add that I feel how lucky we are as a town to have you with us. It feels like you are yet one more example of some of the outstanding professionals that it feels almost miraculous that we have been able to bring into this town through our boards and through our town manager. So thank you very much for joining us, and just know how grateful we are for the talent you bring here.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna ask the board if we can take an agenda item out of order. The next item up is the pipeline, the project pipeline, and I'd like to simply move the discussion of the communication draft ahead of that and take the pipeline up just after that. Lauren Lind.
Oh, Mr. Gomer, sorry. David Pfeiffer's had his
Oh,
electronic.
thank you.
hand
Sorry,
raised.
David. Go ahead.
No, I think this is actually going to run to communication plan. But I think what'll help, Justin, I'd just be curious to hear more from you, just what resources do we have available? We used to have a newspaper. Now we have a Facebook group where I work in politics for a living, and I have pretty thick skin, and somehow the worst things anyone has ever called me or threatened me has happened in Cohasset 143. So that is a double-edged sword. Yeah, we've all been in there. We all know what happens in there. So I would love to hear about what other forums we could have that are maybe a little more productive, a little less people threatening to kick out anyone who wasn't a 7th-generation Cohasset resident. Just anyway, what are you thinking as far as just like general town-wide engagement? Because obviously it won't just be Affordable Housing Trust that needs your services and your skill set. We have lots of things that need to be communicated and communicated better. So just love to hear your general thoughts on like what avenues are available, what resources are being committed. Is it, door-to-door knockers? Is it phone banking? What are you thinking?
Well, Mr. Pfeiffer, thank you for the question. And what I love about communications is that it's different for every board and that it is different for every committee. So for instance, what may work for the select board may not necessarily work for the Affordable Housing Trust. And so we have a vast amount of resources right now that I am excited to work with, everything from social media, when we talk about Facebook, to the website as well. I am also on the website redesign team. We actually met yesterday, so we will be revamping the town's website to really make it easier for folks to access things such as permits, agendas. We're also working on putting together a portal where folks, if they have questions, suggestions, or comments, and so they will hopefully have a direct way to reach out to the town with those suggestions and comments. I've also am skilled in video production, so we will be making all different types of videos, all different types of Facebook Lives, Twitter Lives. So it's really using the technology to our advantage and streamlining it, but also making it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is really working with different boards and different committees to work on a communications plan that works for you all. So if, for instance, working more with video production is what you'd like to do, I'm happy to do that, working and creating certain graphics. So I really would love to sit down with Cindy and to be able to really figure it out, because we have a vast number of resources available to us and to me, and we've got multiple directions that we can go in terms of getting the word out and making sure that people are informed and that people are educated and understand what is going on.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, and I had made a proposal to, again, take the agenda one item out of order. That's a proposal to, I'll consider it to be a motion by the chair. If I can have a second. David Pfeiffer, is that a second?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Move that we move the agenda item around to handle the communication draft currently. Can I have a roll call vote? David Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Tom Mead? You're on
Tom
mute.
Mead, aye.
Yeah. Cindy Matheson?
Cindy Matheson, aye.
Okay, let's, fair enough, motion passes. Let's take up the communication draft now while we have Justin Schreier on the line with us. Justin, do you have a copy of it?
Yes, I do. I have it right in front of me. And if you see me looking down, I'm just writing some notes. I am paying attention.
Yeah, no, this is a draft item, and ideally, I'd like to have the full trust members available to vote on it. But this draft was put out at the moment for discussion purposes. Before we go any further, David, Tom, have you had time to leaf through it? Yeah. Okay. Are there particular items that you have either questions on or you'd like to add? Okay. Fair enough. Geez, Cindy, you did a great job.
I can organize details. Getting those out, this is where I really appreciate the feedback in.
All right, so my feedback actually is more based on current events than anything else. For the abutting members who are still in the listening audience, one of the things that you may or may not know is that the focus on communication in this particular agenda actually preceded town meeting, as did the draft communication plan. Although I have to say that our goals with respect to initiating communication with community members was more to develop, positive engagement for the objectives of the trust. Nonetheless, I think we are after town meeting, and certainly from the conversations we've had this morning, we are informed as to additional needs with respect to communication. And that communication goes, as I pointed out earlier, it's a two-way street. It's both speaking and listening. So, Justin, my focus on this draft, and Cindy, my comment on it would be that we include as an objective something that specifically notes that it recognizes that for many of the endeavors of the trust, we may want to recognize that it can be disruptive to individuals within the community or groups within the community, and we should endeavor to engage those conversations before it becomes a surprise, a disruptive element. And that within the communication plan is, in my recommendation is that we add that as a specific objective. Now, that much less wordy, thank you. But I guess I would put it under the heading of collision avoidance. And
where, Steve, so you're speaking about that as an objective of the communication plan overall, not an objective of the Affordable Housing Committee.
No, it's an objective of the communication plan.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
Okay. Other than that, Cindy, my own observation on this is that I appreciate that you spend a lot of time asking questions as opposed to coming up with answers. how do we best get out to the community? How do we get the message out? How do we solicit engagement and the like? And that's exactly the point where I think we begin to fill that out by looking at how we can execute, and that's where I hope, Justin, that you can lend it an awful lot of expertise. Tom Mead?
Yeah, exactly. I would just maybe put a very fine point on that. And, not a lot of comments out of me on the plan. I think where the rubber meets the road is a meeting, directly between Cindy and Justin. And, let's talk about next steps, website, is it a newsletter beyond just publishing meeting minutes rather, those types of things. I think, a little bit of direct brainstorm by you guys in between meetings. And then let's put this on the agenda again for next month and talk through, you guys kind of let us know what you think the best delivery methods are and the sort of like the channels and the deliverables, let's call them. And then we can get into it. It feels like in some substance.
Okay. Any other comments at the moment? Yes, Justin. Sorry, I saw your hand up in the last second.
That's okay, not a problem. So I do think having a website is in my opinion, with the amount of information that you all will probably be putting out there, is probably the best way to go about it at this time. I'm going to sit down with Cindy and we're going to have some conversations about that. But you want a place where you can have all of your information in one spot, so you can direct those residents and you can direct folks to visit one area, one spot where you can really streamline your message and streamline those communications and to make sure that those residents are getting, for instance, sufficient notice of those meetings and are getting those documents that were talked about earlier in the meeting. Obviously, we've got things such as a web page or a Facebook page. But I was reading Cindy's communication project here that she was working on it and her plan. And I think if you've got the means to create that website, I think it would work out very well.
I agree. And how we go about developing a website is a big question for me. That, again, it's not in my area of expertise. I'm looking for someone, if anybody in the community is a website developer who would like to volunteer their time to help us out, please let us know.
And I will tell you, creating a website is a heck of a lot easier now than it was 5 to 10 years ago. There are many different resources. There are many different website design platforms, and I can kind of go over that with you at some point. I don't want to take up too much of the board's time, but I will tell you, it will take some time, but it's also not as hard as it used to be 5 to 10 years ago. It is fairly easier than it has been.
And agreed, it has to be one spot available to direct people to with a full gamut of the information available.
Cindy, by way of prior vote, you and Ted are charged as a subcommittee for developing the communication plan. I encourage you to both of you to work directly with Justin and see if you can develop some progress on using this as a tool to start to implement the goals. I realize we still need to vote on the draft plan. If we've concluded this part of it, I actually had a hard stop at 10. I can probably go for another 5 minutes, but after that, I've got to go. And once I do, we no longer have a quorum. So I would like, if I may, to do two things and then truncate the meeting short of completing the agenda to take the remainder of the agenda up at our next meeting. Tom, one of the things I'd like to do is just review the pipeline and update that. And the second item is that we did have submitted minutes for a prior meeting. I don't know if those are out yet, Lauren, but if they are, let's vote them. And if they're not, well, then we'll bring them up next meeting.
I didn't have an opportunity to distribute.
Okay, so then I propose that our last item for this agenda is an update on the project pipeline in town. which means that we will defer any further discussion of the communication plan and the finance plan until next meeting. And that also would include the approval of minutes, finances, bills, anything else we have. All right. Tom Mead.
So I'll pull up our, this is helpful for me. I have an Excel spreadsheet that I use to track the things that we're working on. So I'll just put that up on the screen here. It kind of goes in order from like, sort of maybe age of projects, or maybe even just how they came into my head. But 808 Jerusalem, and some of this we normally cover in the first part of the meeting, right, in our report from Rob Jeffers. So we can just do that quickly now. 808 Jerusalem, we heard from Lauren a little while ago, is in front of ZBA. Their comprehensive permit application is in, and they're in front of ZBA. So, nothing for us to do there. We have our $70,000 commitment to soft costs for them. CJC Highway, understand that the sewer situation was squared away, must have street opening permits now available. That'll continue. Our understanding is that the DHCD process is effectively on hold until that project is substantially complete and or receives its certificates of occupancy. So same thing, we'll kind of keep an eye on it, but not much for us to do as a trust. South Main Street, the last we had heard there, the developer was still committed to the 3 units and balls in his court to continue the permitting process. Is that right, Lauren?
That's correct.
Okay. Here's a perfect case of, where we can't be sharing addresses as part of the CHP redevelopment of the inn. They have a confidential property they are proposing to use for their offsite mitigation of affordable housing. We've reviewed that in executive committee or executive session rather. Our understanding is that that's still in process with the HCD, but likely to be approved. Lauren, do you have any update on that?
There were some modifications to the paperwork, the regulatory agreement that needed to take place. So that was done, signed, and resubmitted. So we would anticipate, hopefully within the next month, to have a sort of final determination on that.
Great. Yeah, and so just for people who are here from the public, the idea here is for larger development deals in Cohasset, this is one of the things that we would be in support of, is offsite mitigation. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put affordable units in a multi-million-dollar condo development. So these guys find a way to do offsite mitigation. We worked very closely with the developer on that. Planning board was in favor, AHT was in favor, and this is a win. They're actually providing more actual affordable units than they are technically required to. So this is a big win for us. And here's one where this would be in our pipeline, and we talk about it openly in the meeting. Pleasant Street, it's a project that was listed on the market. I think it's now been purchased. If it wasn't, it was under agreement to purchase, and the developer had indicated that he was going to go forward with the project as it was approved. So that'll result in a number of affordable units for us as well. Just kind of keep an eye on that. It was on the agenda. It was on our pipeline as, would there be anything that we might do there to entice a potential buyer to keep the units or increase the units affordable or anything like that. But for now, it looks like that's just, being sold at market. And then Heather Drive and Mill Lane, obviously we've well covered here today. That's it.
Just one item on this, Tom, if you would just go back up to the top for a second. Our commitment to 808 is 75,000.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for the update. And the Pleasant Street piece is one to keep an eye on for sure. That fits nicely with right in the middle of the village.
Yeah, and it's of interest if that developer, for example, like sort of ever balked or needed help, with the affordable process or anything like that. Like we're here, we want to help. If we can make sure those units are delivered, and that project stays as proposed and as approved, that's what we'd love to see.
Yeah. By the way, I was approached because of a longstanding personal relationship by an official in a condominium association who was discussing a landlocked property abutting their association, and that they'd entertain a larger conversation about that. for obvious reasons, I can't talk about the parcel right now. I know that the owners are looking to sell it, but there really is no market because there is no frontage. And that's where the condo association comes in to be fairly attractive. As soon as we get the go ahead to talk about it in a meeting, we can do so. But that actually looks like that's something that could come online within the next 1.5 to 2 years. All right. That's just by way of an update. As I said, we have no minutes. We'll defer the remainder of the agenda given the time. And Lauren, I'll call you back on that, specifically setting up the next agenda, whether or not we can entertain, or we would be able to entertain a further discussion of the abutters proposal at that one, or we have to schedule something further out. I want to talk to Cindy Amara when she returns from vacation next week. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Seconded.
Okay, motion's made and seconded by way of roll. Cindy Matheson,
Cindy Matheson, aye.
Tom Mead,
Tom Mead, aye.
David Pfeiffer,
David Pfeiffer, aye.
Steve Gomer, aye. Motion passes. We are now adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and attendance today, and take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.